Shin Megami Tensei is such a bizarre series. It's weird how something directly tied to a game as gargantuan in popularity as Persona 5 can still be overlooked. And I don't mean to say SMT is some unknown niche series, because people know this shit, right? As much as people joke, your average JRPG fan knows what SMT is. They know Jack Frost, they know the One More God Rejected meme, they know it's the sister series to Persona. People absolutely know about SMT. The real issue is that they don't seem to care. And it's not a mystery why. The games are far less accessible than their Persona cousins. They're a lot harder. It doesn't have those cozy life sim elements to break up the gameplay. And frankly, the fans don't make it much easier for themselves with the constant elitism and unfunny gatekeeping memes that get posted ad nauseum. But this really is a shame because there's a lot to love in SMT, and even more to love in this specific game I'm going to be talking about today. In fact, I'd probably call it one of the best RPGs I've ever played. Folks, this is Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne.
Wake your reasons hollow boat, where your blizzard season cold. Burn a bridge and burn a boat, stake a lizard by the throat.
The first thing that'll strike you about Nocturne is its art style. It's so much nicer than some generic anime look. There's a sort of darkness there. Everyone is stylized with makeup a la punk rock. This lends every character a moody, gloomy vibe coinciding with the gothic personality of the game. However, Atlus's most impressive achievement in the visuals department is, as always, the creature design. SMT is unmatched when it comes to monster design, truly unmatched. I can't name a single other franchise that even comes close to consistently pulling off this many sick designs. Jack Frost, Mothman, and Pixie are all iconic, but Nocturne is a treasure trove for cool-ass monsters. What makes them all the more interesting is their origins. Nearly every demon is based off figures from real-life folklore from across the world. It's really fun to draw parallels between the IRL description of these characters and the way they're presented in SMT. One of my favorite designs is Metatron, the voice of God. The suffix tron means instrument and is usually used to describe machines. Because of this, Kazuma Kaneko, prominent Atlas character designer slash genius, decided to interpret this character as a sci-fi robot. Yet he still retains a very holy appearance, with gold decorating his silver body and crosses in his bright green eyes. Metatron's design is incredibly cool and takes the original concept in such a creative direction. Nocturne, and Shin Megami Tensei in general, is chock full of dope demons, and I always look forward to seeing how they're represented. However, if there's one thing Megaten is known for more than its monster design, it's its difficulty, which it sometimes gets a bad rap for. I can't speak for the earlier games, but in my opinion, Nocturne has a remarkably fine-tuned difficulty system. If you're playing this like any other JRPG, you're not going to have an easy time because it doesn't operate by the same rules, or rather, operates by similar rules but with a unique spin. Bosses have advantages and disadvantages. Your goal is to mitigate the former and capitalize off the latter. Every boss is a puzzle, and the keys lie in two specific mechanics: buffs and elements. Unlike in a lot of JRPGs where buffs are usually things you can do to make a fight easier, buffs are required in Nocturne if you want to get anywhere, and no one teaches that lesson better than the infamous Matador. Matador serves as a harsh wake-up call. If you've not learned how to properly use buffs by this point like I had, you're going to struggle against this guy hard. His unique skill, Red Capote, raises his agility to its max, making him nearly impossible to hit normally. In order to counter this, you'll want at least one of two skills, Sukukaja and or Sukunda. Since these raise your accuracy and lower the enemies respectively, the playing field will be evened out, giving you a much better fighting chance. Buffs aren't purely used to bring enemies down to your level, though. They can also be used to put them at a significant disadvantage. Since buffs can stack up to 4 ranks, you can totally cripple their stats. Most bosses have moves that remove buffs and debuffs, though, so the brief windows you get when they finally add it up need to be used effectively before it all gets wiped away. The second thing you'll need to know about are the elements. Every enemy reacts to elements in different ways. There are 5 special reactions: Reflect, Absorb, Void, Resist, and Weak. These are all about what they say on the can. Reflect turns the damage back on you, Absorb heals from the attack, Avoid causes the attack to do no damage whatsoever, Resist causes the attack to deal less damage than usual, and Weak causes the attack to do more damage than usual. What adds a lot more depth to this system, however, is the press turn mechanic. Basically, if you get a weakness or land a critical hit, you get a bonus turn. If you hit a resist, absorb, avoid, or miss an attack, you'll lose an extra turn. The press turn system plays a huge part in what makes Nocturne's combat so fun. Suddenly, knowing your enemy becomes more valuable than all the powerful skills you can imagine. Stringing together turns to lay down damage, recover, and use buffs gives you necessary wiggle room to strategize and defeat your opponents. On the flip side, carelessness can cost you much needed turns, which can be devastating. Unfortunately, the right buffs, debuffs, and elemental skills are hard to get down on just 3 demons, which is what your active party is limited to, so it's handy to play Nocturne with a wide variety of demons. Overlooked demons can become wildly useful in specific situations depending on the way they react to the elements at hand and what abilities they have in their kit. In fact, your most reliable teammates can even become a downright hindrance if the enemy keeps scoring press turns off their weaknesses. If you're playing through the game with the intention of sticking to your A team and nothing else, you're going to get fucked up. It's important to have some good backup demons sitting around at all times. This sounds like a pain in the ass, but fortunately it isn't thanks to the Cathedral of Shadows.
Welcome to the Cathedral of Shadows, where demons gather.
The basics of Demon Fusion are simple. You select 2 guys, choose some skills you want to keep, and out pops a shiny new demon. This makes keeping a good supply of backup demons really easy, since if you know what you're doing, you can just exchange old ones that have become irrelevant for new, higher level ones with more useful skills. Fusing during full and new Kagutsuchis often yields different results, along with death stones required for fusing fiends, powerful demons with unique skills, and sacrifices that can be made to make your demon even stronger. Fusion is such a great solution to grinding, giving you a convenient, more fun method of acquiring high-level demons rather than being forced to level up old demons for hours. The point I'm trying to get across is that Nocturne is a hard game, but it's still manageable. I think where a lot of difficult games go wrong is that they pay a lot of attention to making the game really tough without paying much mind to the tools and methods they're going to give the player to overcome their hurdles. That's never the case here. There are always tools at your disposal to turn the tables, and I think it's the challenging nature of this game that makes it so fun. There's such a triumphant feeling as you fight tooth and nail to tip the scales in your favor, slowly but surely dominating your enemy. If there's one nitpick I have with this game's difficulty, it's that I find it a little unfair when bosses that take place a long ways from the last save point bust out an insta-kill well into the battle. Insta-kills absolutely can be dealt with, but they require preparation. This makes it nearly impossible to win the fight on your first try unless you get lucky or look it up beforehand. This wouldn't be a problem if the placement of save points didn't mean that you'd have to slog through half an hour of content you've already played through to get back to the boss. Regardless, Nocturne is a perfect example of how turn-based combat absolutely can be fun, even today. By making the game difficult, it forces you to actually think about what you're doing and engage with its mechanics. I'm of the belief that a lot of people who consider themselves not RPG guys haven't really given the genre a fair shake. If you usually find JRPGs boring, I implore you to play this game, and if you don't like it, fine, I'll shut up, but I just feel like Nocturne fixes so many common complaints of its genre. Well, most of them at least. So we all agree random encounters suck, right? We're all on the same page here. If even I cannot come up with some contrarian brained argument in their favor, they're probably a lost cause. There's a reason why they've been almost entirely absent in most RPGs released in recent years. I mean, shit, they're not in Pokemon anymore, a franchise notorious for being stuck in its ways. Now, I understand that when Nocturne was released, random encounters had long since been the standard, but just because something was the status quo doesn't mean it didn't suck. And believe me, random encounters suck. They interrupt the flow of gameplay and generally make the game a more tedious and irritating experience. They aren't a complete deal breaker, but they're frustrating nonetheless. One way Nocturne stands out from other Shin Megami Tensei games is in its storytelling. Whereas other games in the series are usually a lot more upfront with their narrative, Nocturne takes a different approach. To give a brief premise, the game opens with the protagonist and his friends visiting their sick teacher in the hospital. Immediately, it becomes apparent that something isn't right, and after finally finding your teacher, along with a creepy man in the basement, the world ends. The Conception, as it's called, is an apocalyptic event that turns Earth into the Vortex world, a world begging to be turned into a new one. Any human with enough Magatsuhi and a reason can shape the next universe into whatever they please. Seeing as the only people who survived the conception are people who were inside the hospital at the time of it, there isn't a lot of competition. The protagonist doesn't get to create a reason, though, since he's no longer fully human, having been turned into a half-demon, half-human hybrid known as the Demi-Fiend by a small boy accompanied by an old woman. Even though the beginning of the game is pretty story heavy, this doesn't last, and you'll only see the few survivors once in a while. This makes the few meetings you have with them have all the more impact, and it hurts even more as you watch your friends descend into madness. It's fascinating to watch Chiaki and Isamu develop their philosophies throughout the game. After the Demi-Fiend rescues Isamu from prison late, he decides he'd be better off relying on no one but himself, who's rarely noticed by others prior to the conception, so he figures that's the way the world should work, with everyone living in complete solitude. Chiaki, on the other hand, realizes that no matter how much she cries and calls for help, no one else is going to help her, and that it's up to her own strength to carve her way in the Vortex world. She believes this is the way things should be in her ideal universe, developing a sort of social Darwinistic ideology. These beliefs are absurd and extreme, but it's not like you can't see how these people arrived there. That's not to say there isn't a whole lot of confusing stuff in Nocturne, though. Luckily, if you make your way through the Imala Labyrinth, an optional super dungeon, you'll be drip fed information and lore, letting you slowly gain an understanding of the world. After each floor, you get a sort of lesson on the events transpiring around you, and by the end of the game, I felt like I'd got a genuinely pretty good grip of what was going on. Oh, and speaking of the end of the game, as is standard for Shin Megami Tensei, Nocturne has a whole shitload of endings. Three of them are tied to reasons. You've got Chiaki's social Darwinistic reason of Yosuga, Isamu's reason of solitude called Musubi, and Hikawa, the man who started the conception, has a reason too. The reason of Shijima believes that everyone should just melt together end of Evangelion style and leave the world in complete stagnation. All three of these endings are fairly grim, but I could still see them working in a situation where you were forced to pick the least evil of the bunch. Sadly, this isn't the case because of one other ending, the freedom ending. The freedom ending reverts the world back to a preconception state, returning everyone to life. Sure, in this case, nothing really changes from the start of the game, but like, you get to see your parents again, you know? The issue is that the freedom ending doesn't require any extra effort to get. There are no bonus bosses you have to fight or side quests you have to complete. You just have to choose your answers differently when the game asks you to speak up. So when the game gives you the choice between three endings that are unambiguously shit and one that isn't, the player has no incentive to go for the others outside of achievement hunting. And on that note, the Freedom ending has a much higher completion rate according to both Steam achievements and PlayStation trophies. At the very least, the Freedom ending is very nice and fits with the game's themes. There's one other ending I'd like to talk about though, the True Demon ending. In order to get the True Demon ending, you have to make your way all the way through the previously mentioned Amala Labyrinth. The Amala Labyrinth is a lot of fun since you can play through it at any time you like, or at least prior to the Tower of Kagutsuchi. This lets you make progress at your own pace, and if you find it too challenging, you can just come back later. The best part of it, in my opinion, is the puzzles. Speaking of, the puzzles in Nocturne are really competently designed overall. They're not brain dead easy, but they require some good logical thinking, and I genuinely enjoyed my time with them. This is coming from someone who gets tired of puzzles pretty quickly and just resorts to looking them up a lot of the time, mind you. Anyways, once you reach the very bottom of the Amala Labyrinth and fight two of the best bosses in the game, you sacrifice your humanity and proceed with the rest of the game as usual. Except instead of aligning with any particular reason, you squash them all and destroy all chances of recreation as we know it. Then Lucifer reveals himself. Lucifer is my favorite true final boss in any video game. Right off the bat, his fucking battle music is incredible. The music in Nocturne is incredible in general. Even if you haven't played the game, you've probably heard bits and pieces of the battle themes. The iconic, near unintelligible lyrics make them feel so ominous and menacing. I like to think of them as the Demi-Fiend's theme songs, reminders to your opponents that they aren't the threat here, you are. On the other hand, Lucifer's theme feels so full of hope, like you're right there at the finish line, yet there are still sinister undertones, as there should be in the presence of the fallen angel. While Kagutsuchi himself is certainly a challenge, he doesn't quite feel like final boss material. Lucifer, though, is a true test of skill. With the highest HP in the game by a mile and resistances to fucking everything. Skills like Pierce, which breaks through resistance to physical attacks, and Debilitate, which lowers all the enemy stats, can help out a lot, but given how long a fight it is and how powerful Lucifer's moves are, you're always kept on your toes. However, as usual, if you bring an appropriate team and play smart, it's entirely possible to pull through, and when you finally do, it feels euphoric. At last, at the end of your journey, Lucifer accepts you as worthy of being his general. You and all the creatures who've lurked in darkness can finally rise up against the will of God, tearing down the endless cycle of death and rebirth and ushering in an age of true change. Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne. What a beautiful video game.